The morning sun touched the small house softly, painting everything in gold. Thin rays of light passed through lace curtains and fell on the wooden floor. The sound of a clock ticking slowly filled the room. It was the same sound that had followed Amara every morning for the last 10 years. She was 60, graceful in her movements, her hair now silver, but still shining under the morning light. She sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The air carried the smell of old wood and roses from the garden outside. Amara's house was neat, quiet, and full of memories. Every photo frame on the wall told a story: her husband smiling in uniform, her young self holding a bouquet, the small trips they once took together. But now the house was silent. Her husband had passed away long ago, and her children lived far away. The days were long and lonely. She tried to keep herself busy, cleaning, reading, watering plants, but some mornings the silence became heavy, pressing on her chest like a memory she couldn't escape. She took a deep breath and whispered, "It's another day, Amara." Another quiet morning. Outside, the sound of a bicycle stopped near the gate. A soft knock followed. It was the new gardener the neighborhood association had recommended. She had hired him a week ago after her last gardener moved to another city. She stood up slowly, smoothing her shawl, and walked to the door. When she opened it, a young man stood there holding a small bundle of tools. He couldn't have been more than 20. His name was Arif, tall, with kind eyes and a shy smile. His clothes were simple, but his posture showed respect. "Good morning, ma'am," he said softly. "I came to check the garden as you asked." Amara nodded. "Yes, Arif. The roses need trimming. They've grown wild." He smiled and said, "I'll take care of them." She stepped aside to let him in. The garden was her favorite place, a small patch of beauty in her quiet world. As he began to work, she watched from the porch, her hands wrapped around her teacup. The sound of leaves brushing, scissors clipping, and birds singing made the air alive again. For the first time in weeks, she felt something warm inside, not happiness exactly, but a soft reminder that life still moved forward. Arif hummed a tune as he worked. His voice was low and calm, mixing with the sound of the breeze. Amara smiled faintly. It reminded her of her husband, who used to whistle while fixing the fence. She said quietly, almost to herself, "You have a good voice." Arif looked up, surprised. "Thank you, ma'am. My mother used to say that too." "She must be proud of you," Amara said, her eyes softening. He smiled, then looked down again. "She passed away when I was a child." The silence that followed was gentle, not heavy. Two people different in age and time stood in the same sunlight, both carrying a kind of emptiness they no longer spoke about. After finishing the roses, Arif came to the porch and said, "Do you want me to clean the back area too?" "Yes, please," she replied. "That part hasn't been cleaned in months." He nodded and went around the side. Amara followed with a tray of water and biscuits. She placed it on the small table under the shade. When he returned, his forehead glistened with sweat and his shirt had dust marks. She noticed how hard he worked, his hands strong but careful. "You should rest," she said. "Drink some water." He hesitated, unsure if he should sit. But she smiled and gestured to the chair. "It's all right. Sit down." He thanked her and sat. For a while, they drank in silence, listening to the faint hum of distant traffic and the soft whistle of the wind. "Do you live nearby?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. A small room in the old part of the town. I do small jobs. It helps pay my sister's school fee." Amara's heart softened. "That's kind of you." He looked at her and smiled, his eyes meeting hers for a moment. Something in that gaze was pure and young, yet full of quiet strength. She looked away quickly, pretending to fix the tray as the day moved toward noon. He finished his work and packed his tools. "I'll come again tomorrow," he said politely. She nodded, her voice gentle. Yes, please do. The garden feels alive again because of you. He smiled. I'm glad you like it. When he left, the gate clicked softly behind him. The house was quiet once more, but it felt different, not empty, not cold. She looked at the flowers he had trimmed, neat and bright under the sunlight. The same warm feeling returned to her chest. That night, when she sat in her chair by the window, she replayed the sound of his voice in her mind, the calm way he spoke, the honesty in his eyes. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something softer, a reminder of warmth she had forgotten she could feel. The clock ticked slowly. Outside, the stars shone over her little house. Inside, for the first time in years, Amara whispered goodnight, not to the memory of her late husband, but to the quiet hope growing somewhere deep in her heart. And as the wind touched the curtains, she smiled faintly, unaware that this simple morning would soon change her entire life. The next day, the sun rose with a quiet warmth. The light slipped through the curtains and fell across the small table where Amara sat with her morning tea. She had slept better than usual. The air in her house felt lighter, the silence softer. It was strange, she thought, how a small change, the sound of someone working in the garden, the hum of a young voice, could fill the emptiness she had carried for so long. By the time the clock struck 10, she heard it again, the sound of the gate creaking open, footsteps on the gravel path. Arif had returned. He carried a wooden box of tools and a small basket of seeds. His clothes were simple, but his face carried a calm brightness. He waved politely when he saw her standing by the window. "Good morning, ma'am," he called. She smiled back. "You came early today." He nodded. "There's much to do. The back garden is full of weeds." Amara brought him a small towel and a glass of water. "You work too hard," she said softly. He smiled as he took the glass. "Work keeps me peaceful, ma'am. I like seeing things grow." His words made her pause. She had once felt the same when her husband was alive, when they planted trees together in the yard. She watched him kneel near the soil, his hands moving gently as if the earth itself trusted him. The sound of his trowel mixing with the song of sparrows made the afternoon feel alive again. Inside the house, she busied herself with small tasks, dusting shelves, folding laundry, but her eyes often drifted to the window where he worked. The sun lit the outline of his face, and every now and then he would look up and smile, not noticing how that simple act warmed the air around her. Around noon, she walked outside carrying a tray with lemonade and sandwiches. "Take a break, Arif," she said. "You can't work in the sun all day." Kay stood quickly, brushing the soil from his hands. "Thank you, ma'am. You didn't have to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble," she replied. "You remind me of my son when he used to help me with the garden. He never sat still either." Arif chuckled. "Then maybe that's why your plants like me. They think I'm family." She laughed, a soft sound she hadn't made in a long time. They sat under the shade of an old mango tree. The leaves rustled above them, and the gentle wind carried the scent of jasmine. "Tell me, Arif," she asked after a moment, "why do you always smile, even when working so hard?" He looked thoughtful. "My mother used to say, life only listens to people who smile. After she passed, I kept smiling for her." Her heart ached at his words. "You were very close to her, weren't you?" "Yes," he said quietly. "She was everything. I think that's why I like working for older people. They remind me of her." Amara looked at him closely. His voice was calm, but carried a kind of sadness she understood too well. "You're a good boy, Arif," she said softly. "The world needs more hearts like yours." He smiled, a little shy now. "Thank you, ma'am. You're kind to me." As they ate, their conversation grew easier. They spoke of books, gardens, and small joys. The smell of rain, the sound of evening prayers, the taste of mangoes in summer. There was laughter between their words, and something gentle began to bloom in the silence between them. After lunch, he stood and stretched. "I'll finish trimming the side fence before I go." She nodded. "Be careful of the thorns. They're sharp." He grinned. "I'll survive." As he walked away, she found herself watching him longer than she meant to. There was strength in his movements, but also gentleness, the way he handled every plant as if it were something fragile. She felt a warmth rise in her chest again, confusing and soft. She turned away quickly, shaking her head. "Don't be foolish, Amara," she whispered to herself. "You're 60. He's just a boy helping with the garden." But the heart rarely listens to reason. When the afternoon sun began to lower, shadows stretched across the yard. Arif finished his work, washed his hands at the tap, and came to the porch. "All done, ma'am," he said. "I'll come tomorrow to plant the seeds." She smiled, but her eyes lingered on him. "You've done a lot already." "The garden hasn't looked this alive in years." He hesitated, then said softly, "Sometimes, things only need a little care to come back to life." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the wind filled the space between them, carrying unspoken words neither dared to name. When he left, the gate clicked shut again, and she stood by the door longer than usual. Inside, her heart beat faster, and her hands felt oddly warm. She sat by the window, watching the evening light fall across the garden. The same garden where her heart had quietly started to change, as the sky turned pink and the first stars appeared. Amara whispered, "What is happening to me?" In the distance, she could still hear the echo of his humming. It followed her into the night like a secret melody, one that felt dangerous and tender all at once. That evening, when she poured herself a cup of tea, the house didn't feel empty anymore. The walls seemed to breathe. The clock ticked with rhythm, and the garden outside glowed faintly in the moonlight. Amara didn't realize it yet, but her quiet heart had begun to bloom again, not in the soft memory of her past, but in the living warmth of something new, something she could neither name nor resist. And in the soft hum of the night, her heart whispered to itself a sound even she was afraid to hear. The sky was heavy with clouds that evening, painting the world in soft gray. The wind carried the smell of rain, and distant thunder rolled gently across the hills. Amara sat by the window, watching the first drops fall against the glass. The ticking clock, the whispering wind, and the low hum of thunder filled her quiet home with a strange calmness. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and made tea, her favorite comfort on stormy evenings. The small house glowed with warm yellow light. Outside, the rain turned stronger, dancing against the leaves and the earth. She loved the rain. It reminded her of her younger days, of laughter, of the man she once waited for by the window. But tonight felt different. The memory of Arif's smile had followed her all day. Just as she lifted her cup, there was a knock at the door. The sound startled her. No one visited her at this hour. She opened the door to find Arif, soaked to the skin, holding a small package under his shirt to keep it dry. "Arif, you'll catch a cold," she exclaimed. "Come inside quickly." He smiled shyly. "I was on my way home when the rain started. I brought the seeds we talked about. I thought I'd give them to you before I forgot." "You could have come tomorrow," she said, pulling him in. "Look at you, you're dripping." He laughed softly, the sound mixing with the patter of rain. "It's just water, ma'am. I don't melt." She shook her head, half smiling, half scolding, and handed him a towel. "Sit near the fire. I'll make you some tea." As he sat by the small heater, steam rose from his wet clothes. The sound of rain against the roof made the room feel smaller, closer. She brought him a cup and watched as he cupped it in his hands, warmth returning to his fingers. For a while, they drank in silence. The only sounds were rain, teacups, and the faint hum of his breathing. Then she spoke softly, her voice low. "You remind me of someone," she said. "My husband. He used to come home drenched like this after long days of work. He always forgot his umbrella." Arif smiled gently. "He must have been a good man." "He was," she whispered. "Kind, quiet. He used to hum when he worked just like you." Their eyes met. In that small moment, something unspoken passed between them, a warmth that wasn't just memory or kindness. It was alive, trembling, dangerous. She looked away quickly, pretending to stir her tea. He noticed her shaking hands and said softly, "You must miss him." "I do," she said after a long pause. "But sometimes, I think I miss the feeling of being seen more than the person himself." He tilted his head. "Being seen." She nodded. "When you get older, people stop looking at you like you matter. They talk, they nod, but they don't see you. They see your age, your wrinkles, your years, not your heart." Arif set his cup down. His voice was calm but deep. "I see you, ma'am. I see how gentle you are, how much you care for everything around you. I see how your eyes light up when you talk about your garden." Her breath caught. She looked at him slowly. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said in a whisper. "Why not?" He asked softly. "It's the truth." The room grew quiet except for the rain. Her heart beat faster than it had in years. She tried to change the subject, but the silence between them was heavy, filled with words they didn't know how to speak. "Arif," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly, "you are very young. You don't understand how people will look at us if they," he interrupted gently, "if they what? See that I care about you." She looked down. "It's wrong. The world will never accept it." He smiled sadly. "The world doesn't have to understand everything, ma'am. Sometimes the heart just chooses." Her eyes filled with tears she hadn't expected. "You shouldn't say such things," she repeated softly. But her voice broke halfway through. He stood up slowly and walked closer, stopping just a few steps away. The firelight flickered between them, glowing against his face. "I'm sorry if I said too much," he murmured. "I just don't want you to feel alone." She looked up at him, her vision blurred by tears. "You're kind, Arif. Too kind. But this can't happen." He nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on her. "Maybe it already has," he whispered. The rain grew louder outside, covering the sound of her breath catching. She turned away, wiping her face, trying to calm her heart. "You should go before the storm gets worse," she said. Finally, he hesitated. "Will you be all right?" "Yes," she whispered. "I've been all right for many years." Kay didn't believe her, but he nodded and stepped toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back. "Thank you for the tea," he said quietly, "and for listening." After he left, the door clicked softly shut. She leaned against it, closing her eyes. The warmth of his words still lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of rain and fire. She touched her face, realizing her heart was beating too fast. "What are you doing, Amara?" she whispered. "You're losing yourself." But as she looked out the window, she saw him walking away in the rain, tall, calm, fading into the mist, and she couldn't stop the small, trembling smile that appeared on her lips. That night, she sat in the dim light of the fire, staring into the flames. The sound of rain on the roof seemed to echo his words, "I see you," and for the first time in decades, she believed it. The next evening arrived with a quiet stillness. The rain had stopped, leaving the earth fresh and shining under the soft moonlight. The scent of wet soil drifted through the open windows of Amara's house. The night was calm, too calm, the kind that made every small sound feel louder. The clock ticked slowly. The curtains swayed, and Amara sat alone, trying to read a book she couldn't focus on. Her eyes moved over the same line again and again. but her thoughts were elsewhere. She could still hear Arif's voice from the night before. "I see you." Those words had settled deep inside her, replaying again and again. She had told herself it was wrong to think about him, wrong to feel anything beyond kindness. Yet every time she thought of his smile, her heart betrayed her. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was late, too late for visitors. Slowly, she stood and went to the door. When she opened it, Arif was standing there, holding a small basket of vegetables from the garden. "I'm sorry to come this late," he said gently, "but I thought you might like these before they spoil." Her breath caught. "Arif, you didn't have to." "I couldn't sleep," he said simply. The night felt too quiet. She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in. You must be cold." He entered quietly. The soft yellow light of the lamp fell across his face, and for a second, the world outside seemed to disappear. She took the basket from his hands and placed it on the table. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice calm, but her hands trembling slightly. He nodded. "If it's no trouble." She smiled faintly. "You always say that," he chuckled softly. "Because you're always too kind." As the kettle whistled, a faint sound of rain began again, light like a whisper. She poured the tea into 2 cups, and when she turned, he was standing near the window, looking out into the night. His reflection glowed in the glass, young, thoughtful, and distant. "Do you ever get lonely, ma'am?" he asked suddenly, his voice quiet but steady. She hesitated. "Sometimes," she said, "but I've learned to live with silence. It's safer than disappointment." He turned to her slowly. "Silence can be heavier than words. You deserve to be heard." She looked away quickly. "Arif, please don't say things like that." "Why?" he asked softly. "Because they're true." Her hands trembled as she set the cup down. "Because they make me feel things I shouldn't." The room grew still. The sound of the rain filled the silence again, each drop falling like a heartbeat. He took a slow step closer. "You've done nothing wrong, Amara." She looked up at him, her voice shaking. "You shouldn't call me that." "Then what should I call you?" He whispered. Her lips parted, but no words came out. His nearness made her chest tighten, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years. The warmth in his eyes, the calm strength in his voice, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. It was too much and not enough at the same time. He reached out, hesitating halfway. "I can stop if you want me to." Her eyes met his. "You should," she whispered. "But I don't want you to." For a long moment, neither moved. The rain grew heavier outside, covering the sound of her heartbeat. Then, slowly, he took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, and real. She didn't pull away. They stood in silence, the kind that spoke more than words ever could. "I don't understand what's happening to me," she whispered. "I've lived alone for so long. I thought my heart had stopped feeling anything." He smiled gently. Maybe it was only waiting for the right reason to wake up again. She laughed softly, tears filling her eyes. "You're just a boy, Arif." He shook his head. "No, I'm a man who sees you as you are, not as the world does." Her tears slipped down her cheek, and he reached up, brushing one away carefully with his thumb. The simple touch made her close her eyes. The moment stretched between them, fragile, dangerous, beautiful. When she finally spoke again, her voice was a whisper. "This can't last." He smiled faintly. "Then let it exist for tonight." The sound of thunder rolled again, soft and far away. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. Their hands stayed together, neither wanting to let go. There were no promises, no declarations, just the quiet truth that 2 lonely hearts had found each other in the wrong place. At the wrong time, yet exactly when they needed to. Later, when the rain eased and silence returned, she sat beside him by the fire. They didn't speak much. Sometimes he hummed softly, and she leaned her head against the chair, listening. The warmth of the fire mixed with the warmth of his presence until she could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Before he left, he stood near the door and looked at her. "Thank you for letting me in tonight," he said. She smiled weakly. "You shouldn't have come." "I know," he said. "But if I hadn't, I would have felt emptier than I could bear." When the door closed behind him, she stood in the silence, her heart heavy and full at once. She walked to the window and watched him disappear into the fog. The night was still, but she could hear her own heartbeat, soft, quick, and alive. And in that heartbeat lived a secret neither of them dared to name. The morning arrived slowly, like a hesitant visitor, unsure of being welcome. The first rays of light slipped through the curtains, touching the room where the scent of last night's rain still lingered. Amara opened her eyes, feeling the quiet hum of the world around her. The clock ticked softly, the kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen, and somewhere outside, birds began their fragile songs. She sat up slowly, her mind still heavy with the memories of the night before. Every sound in the room seemed louder. The creak of the floorboards, the whisper of her shawl brushing against her arm, the uneven rhythm of her breath. Her heart was restless, unsure if it should feel joy or regret. She remembered Arif's hand, warm, gentle, steady. The way his eyes had held hers when words became too small to carry what they felt. The closeness, the silence. The truth that had filled the room like light. Now, in the clear light of morning, it all felt both beautiful and forbidden. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, it was only a moment, nothing more. But her heart refused to agree. A knock came at the door, soft but certain. Her pulse quickened. She already knew who it was. When she opened the door, Arif stood there, holding a basket of fresh bread and milk. His smile was calm, but his eyes carried a careful warmth, as if both of them understood that words could break the fragile peace between them. "Good morning." "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Good morning," she replied, her voice barely steady. "You're early again." He nodded. "I thought you might need breakfast." "You didn't have to," she said. "You've already done enough." "I wanted to," he answered softly. She stepped aside and let him in. The morning light fell across his face, and for a moment she saw not the young gardener, but the man who had stayed in her home last night when the world outside was drowning in rain. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table. She poured tea. He broke bread. The air between them was quiet, but not cold. It was heavy with something they didn't dare to name. "Did you sleep well?" he asked finally. She nodded. "I tried." Then, after a pause, she asked, "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I thought about you." Her hand froze halfway to her cup. "Arif," he looked down, embarrassed but honest. "I know I shouldn't say it, but I don't want to lie." Her heart trembled again. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "What happened last night? It shouldn't have." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it shouldn't have, but I don't regret it." She sighed deeply. "You're young. You'll understand later that some things are meant to remain only memories." He met her gaze. "Then let it be a memory that was kind." The words hung between them like the soft light through the window. Amara looked away, her throat tight. She had lived so many years locked inside duty and silence. Now, this young man, kind, honest, fearless, had opened a door she didn't know still existed in her heart to change the mood. She stood and began clearing the table. "You should go now," she said gently. "People talk. I don't want you to get into trouble." He stood as well, watching her quietly. "You're worried about me?" "Of course," she replied, without looking at him. You've already done enough for me. You shouldn't risk your reputation." He smiled softly. Reputation doesn't matter much when you finally meet someone who feels like home. She turned sharply, her eyes wide. "Don't say that. You don't understand what you're saying." "I do," he said simply. "I know what I feel." Her lips parted, but no answer came. The morning light made her tears shimmer. She turned her face away. "Arif, I can't give you the life you deserve. I'm too old. People will laugh at you. They'll say things that will hurt you." "I've been hurt before," he said, "but never by kindness." His words broke something inside her. She placed her hand over her heart as if to calm its storm. "You should go," she whispered again, but this time her voice was trembling, not with anger, but with emotion. He didn't move for a while. The silence between them stretched, filled with everything left unsaid. Then, slowly, he nodded. "If that's what you want, I'll go." She didn't answer. He turned toward the door, his steps quiet. But before leaving, he stopped and said softly, "I'll still take care of your garden. It's the only place I can still see you smile." When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed in the room like a heartbeat fading away. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had stood. The smell of tea, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of the ticking clock. Everything felt too still. She walked to the garden window and saw him outside, trimming the roses with slow, thoughtful movements. His head was bowed, his focus gentle. Every time he cut a branch, she felt the pain inside her chest deepen, as if each snip removed a piece of her heart. By the time he left that day, the garden looked beautiful, neat, alive, full of color. But Amara felt empty, as if he had taken all her warmth with him. She sat on the porch long after he was gone, her eyes tracing the path he had walked. The sun was setting now, bathing everything in gold. She whispered softly to herself, "Why does love always come when it's too late?" The wind stirred the leaves, almost as if answering her, and as evening fell, she realized that the silence of her house no longer felt like peace. It felt like longing. The days passed quietly after that morning. The house returned to its soft rhythm, the ticking of the clock, the sound of the broom on the floor, and the steady hum of distant life outside. But something had changed inside Amara. Every corner of the home carried his memory, the chair he had sat on, the teacup he had held, even the small mark on the table where his tools once rested. She tried to bury her thoughts in chores. She cleaned, cooked, and read books she didn't understand anymore. Yet every evening she found herself standing by the window, watching the garden he had once cared for. The roses were blooming again, brighter, fuller, almost as if they were alive with the same warmth he had left behind. One morning, as she bent down to water the plants, she felt dizzy. The watering can slipped from her hand, spilling water on her feet. She rested against the fence, breathing deeply, waiting for the wave of weakness to pass. "Just tired," she told herself. But the feeling didn't go away. It continued for days, strange fatigue, a fluttering heartbeat, a heaviness she couldn't explain. Her appetite disappeared. At night, she couldn't sleep. In the morning, her hands trembled. Finally, after much hesitation, she decided to visit the small clinic near the marketplace. The doctor, an old friend of her late husband, greeted her kindly. "It's been years, Amara. How have you been keeping?" She smiled faintly. "Still alive, doctor. But lately, something feels off." He examined her carefully, listening to her heartbeat, asking about her habits. Then he ordered a few routine tests. "It's probably nothing serious," he said with a reassuring smile. "Just age catching up with you." But a few days later, when she returned for the results, his expression was different. He looked at the paper, then back at her. His brows furrowed and his voice dropped low. "Amara, This can't be right. She frowned. What's wrong? He hesitated, his tone cautious. According to this, you're pregnant. The word struck her like thunder. The world went silent. The sound of the ticking clock on the wall seemed to slow. That's impossible, she whispered. I thought so too, he said. But I checked twice. It's true. I don't understand how, but it's true. Her hands began to shake. Doctor, I'm 60 years old. You must be mistaken. He sighed softly. The body works in strange ways. Maybe it's a miracle. Or maybe. He didn't finish the sentence. Amara, you should rest. We'll run more tests, but you must be careful. She left the clinic in a daze, her steps slow and unsteady. The sunlight outside felt too bright, the air too heavy. Her mind was racing, replaying the doctor's words over and over. Pregnant, impossible, unbelievable, and yet, that night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in her chair, holding her trembling hands together. She thought of Arif, his warmth, his touch, the quiet night that had changed everything. A tear slipped down her cheek as the truth began to form in her heart. The next morning, she sent a message for him to come. He arrived quickly, as he always did, smiling softly. You called, ma'am? Her voice was quiet, but firm. We need to talk. He frowned slightly, sensing her seriousness. Is something wrong? She looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion, fear, and something deeper, a fragile hope she was too afraid to name. The doctor says I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like lightning after a storm. For a long moment, Arif said nothing. His face went pale, his hands still. Pregnant. He repeated softly. She nodded slowly. He said it's impossible, but it's true. Arif stepped back, his eyes wide with disbelief. That can't be. I know, she interrupted, her voice shaking. I'm too old. It shouldn't happen. But it has. He stared at her, the weight of it sinking in. Are you sure? She looked away. Yes. Silence filled the room. The sound of the wind outside grew louder, almost like a whisper of fate. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling slightly. Then, it's my fault. She looked up sharply. No, Arif. Don't say that. He shook his head. It is. I should never have come that night. I should have stayed away. Her eyes softened, though her tears fell freely now. Don't blame yourself. Neither of us planned this. It wasn't wrong, Arif. It was human. He ran his hand through his hair, pacing. People will never understand. They'll destroy you. They'll call you names. I've lived through worse, she said quietly. But this is different. I don't know whether to feel ashamed or blessed. He stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. Do you want to keep it? She hesitated. Her hands moved over her heart, trembling. It's a life, Arif. It's part of both of us. How could I not? He walked closer, his eyes wet now. Then I'll stand by you. Whatever happens, she shook her head gently. You don't have to. You're young. You deserve freedom, a future. He smiled sadly. My future began the day I met you. Her tears turned into quiet sobs. He knelt beside her, holding her hands. We'll face it together, he whispered. Let them talk. Let them laugh. You gave me something worth living for. The rain began to fall again outside, soft, steady, endless. For the first time in her life, Amara didn't feel alone. The fear was still there. But it was wrapped in warmth, the warmth of truth, of love, of something greater than either of them had expected. She looked into his eyes and whispered, Maybe this is life's strange way of giving me one more chance. He smiled through his tears. Then let's not waste it. And as thunder rolled softly in the distance, their hands stayed joined, two hearts holding on to something that the world would never understand, but that both of them knew was real. The days after the news felt unreal, as if Amara was living in someone else's life. She moved through her home quietly, her hands resting often on her stomach. Not because she could feel anything yet, but because she was trying to believe it was true. Sometimes she laughed at herself softly. Other times she cried for no reason. The mornings felt longer and nights turned heavy with thoughts she couldn't share. Arif came every day, as he always did. He still worked in the garden, still brought her food, still spoke gently. But there was something new in his eyes now, a careful protectiveness, a quiet strength that seemed far older than his age. Whenever she grew tired, he would stop his work and help her sit down. "You shouldn't carry anything heavy now," he said one morning. She smiled faintly. "Arif, I've carried heavier things in life than this." He looked at her seriously. "Not this time. You're not alone anymore." His words warmed her heart. But they also reminded her of the truth she had kept from him, the truth she had hidden for most of her adult life. A secret that only two people had ever known, her late husband. And now, maybe soon, Arif. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the air grew cool, she sat on the porch watching the orange sky fade into violet. Arif joined her with 2 cups of tea. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant sound of children laughing somewhere beyond the walls. The call of the muezzin rising in the calm air. Finally, Amara spoke softly. "Arif, there's something you don't know about me?" "Okay." He turned to her, his expression open and calm. "You can tell me anything." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she held the warm cup. "When I married my husband, the doctors told me something I never shared with anyone. They said I couldn't have children." Arif's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "For years," she continued, "I tried everything, medicines, prayers, tears, but nothing worked. My husband was kind, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes every day. After he died, I told myself that maybe it was God's plan for me to live childless." She paused, her voice breaking. "So you see, this pregnancy isn't just surprising Arif, it's impossible." He stared at her in silence, trying to take in her words. The sound of the wind rustled the leaves in the garden, carrying the weight of what she had said into the night. "Then how?" He whispered finally. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know. The doctor said it's a miracle. But part of me wonders if it's something else, something I can't explain." Arif reached out and held her hand gently. "Maybe it's not for us to explain. Maybe it's just meant to be." Tears filled her eyes. "People won't see it that way. They'll laugh, they'll whisper, they'll say cruel things. And I can't bear to see you hurt because of me." He smiled faintly. "Let them talk. I don't care what they say. You gave me a reason to believe in love again." His words made her heart ache, not with sadness, but with a deep tenderness she had never known before. Still, fear gnawed at her. "You're too young, Arif. When the world finds out, they'll call you names. They'll say you were foolish, that you took advantage," he interrupted softly. "Then let them say what they want. I know the truth, and you do too." Their eyes met, and for a long moment the air between them was still. The sound of the crickets filled the silence, blending with the soft crackle of the lantern beside them. But even as she smiled at him, her heart carried another secret, one she hadn't told even the doctor. The truth was, when she had gone back for a follow-up visit, the doctor had looked at her with disbelief. He had run the test again, this time with a specialist from the city. And the results had revealed something she couldn't yet bring herself to speak. The child growing inside her carried unusual genetic signs, a rare pattern, unlike ordinary conception. The doctor had said quietly, almost in awe, "It's as if your body turned back time, Amara. You're not supposed to be able to conceive. But your blood shows the activity of a woman half your age. It's scientifically impossible. Amara hadn't told Arif. Not yet. She wanted to protect him from questions she couldn't answer. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was a miracle. Or maybe love itself had changed something deep within her. Something no science could explain. Days turned into weeks. Her body began to change, slowly, gently. Arif noticed the glow on her face, the softness in her steps. He would smile whenever she caught him staring. "You're beautiful," he'd say quietly, as if afraid to break the moment. One afternoon, while buying groceries, Amara heard the whispers begin. Two women stood near the fruit stall, speaking in low voices that weren't low enough. "Have you heard? That old widow, Amara. People say she's expecting a child." The other laughed cruelly. "At her age? Impossible. She's gone mad, poor thing." Amara kept her head high, but her hands shook. When she returned home, Arif noticed her pale face. What happened? She forced a smile. "Nothing that hasn't happened before. The world just remembered I exist." He frowned. "If they hurt you, She touched his hand gently. "No, Arif. Don't fight them. Let them talk. Words can't harm what they don't understand." That night, she finally told him what the doctor had discovered. The impossible science. The unexplained miracle. Arif listened, his eyes wide, not with fear, but with wonder. "Then it really is a gift," he said softly. "Maybe love isn't bound by age, or reason, or even time." She looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I do," he whispered. "Because I see it in you. You're proof of it." As the night deepened, she rested her head on his shoulder. The world outside could call it madness, sin, or scandal. But in that quiet room, with the sound of their breathing and the soft hum of life between them, it felt only like love. And in that love, they both began to realize miracles don't always come with angels or signs from heaven. Sometimes, they come as the quiet heartbeat of something the world says should never exist. The final months passed like a dream, quiet, fragile, and full of waiting. The small house that once echoed with loneliness now pulsed with the rhythm of new life. Morning light felt warmer, afternoons softer, and even the nights carried a strange kind of peace. The garden outside bloomed wildly, as if the flowers themselves were celebrating the impossible miracle growing inside Amara. Her days had become slower. She would sit by the window, her hands gently resting on her stomach, humming old lullabies she hadn't sung in years. Arif worked quietly nearby, fixing small things, preparing food, making sure she never had to lift more than a cup. Sometimes he would pause to look at her, his gaze full of awe, as if he still couldn't believe that this was real. One morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains, Amara turned to him with a faint smile. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "why this happened to us?" He looked up from the floor, where he was arranging her slippers neatly. "Maybe because we both needed something to live for," he said. "Maybe love doesn't follow the same rules as the rest of the world." Her eyes softened. "Love, it came so quietly, I didn't even see it coming." Arif chuckled. "That's how it always does." They shared a small smile, the kind that carried everything words couldn't. But the peace didn't last forever. The whispers in town had turned into open talk. People pointed when she walked to the market. Some looked at her with pity, others with judgment. "Shameless," one woman muttered as Amara passed. "She's too old to even think of such things." Amara said nothing. She only held her shawl closer and walked on. She had faced gossip before, but this time it wasn't just about her. It was about the small life she carried inside her. That made every cruel word cut deeper. When she returned home that day, Arif was waiting at the gate. He saw the look on her face and didn't need to ask. He simply took the basket from her hand and said softly, They don't know you. They don't know us." She nodded, tears threatening her eyes. "I'm not afraid for myself, Arif. I'm afraid for the child. I don't want this baby to grow under shame." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "This child isn't a mistake, Amara. It's a miracle. And miracles don't bow to shame." She wanted to believe him. And yet part of her heart still trembled with fear. Fear of the world, fear of time, fear that fate might take away what it had given so suddenly. Weeks later, the day finally came. The early morning sky was heavy with clouds again, just like the night they first crossed paths. Arif rushed around the small house, his hands shaking as the midwife arrived. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil and jasmine. Hours passed like minutes. Pain filled the room, but it was mixed with strength, the kind born not from youth, but from love. When the cries finally broke the silence, they were soft at first, then strong. Alive, Amara lay weak but smiling, tears glistening in her eyes as the midwife placed the baby in her arms. The tiny fingers curled around her own, fragile yet certain. Arif knelt beside her, his eyes wide and full of wonder. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Amara nodded, her voice trembling. "She looks like hope." The baby's small cry echoed through the house, filling every quiet corner that had once known only silence. For a long moment, the world outside didn't exist. There was only this room. This child, this impossible love made real. The days that followed were gentle but hard. News spread fast, and the small town couldn't stop talking. But something strange began to happen. The whispers didn't stop, but they started to change. Some people came by curious at first and left in silence, unable to deny the beauty of what they saw. The doctor visited often, still astonished by the miracle. "I can't explain it," he said one day, shaking his head. "Your body defied everything science knows. This child is perfectly healthy. More than that, she's extraordinary." Amara only smiled faintly. "Love isn't something you measure with science, doctor. Sometimes it just chooses you." When the doctor left, Arif stood at the door, watching him disappear down the road. "The world will never understand," he said quietly. She looked at him, rocking the baby gently. "It doesn't have to, as long as you do." He moved closer, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "I do, more than anything." Months passed. The baby grew stronger, her laughter like music in the little house. Neighbors who once whispered began to stop by with gifts, clothes, milk, toys. Their voices were softer now, their eyes warmer. Maybe they didn't understand, but they couldn't deny the peace that surrounded Amara's home. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amara sat on the porch with the baby in her arms. The air was golden and still. Arif joined her, sitting quietly beside her. The child reached out, touching his cheek with her tiny hand. He smiled and kissed her fingers. Amara watched them, her eyes full of quiet joy. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Every day. But I try not to plan too much. Life never follows the map we draw." She laughed softly. "You've learned that too early." He looked at her tenderly. "You taught me." Silence settled again, but it was peaceful, the kind of silence that feels alive. The baby's soft breathing filled the air, and the first stars began to appear. Amara closed her eyes for a moment, her heart full. She thought of the woman she once was, lonely, forgotten, surrounded by silence. And she thought of the woman she had become, a mother, a lover, and a living miracle. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Love doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives quietly, stubbornly, beautifully." Arif looked at her, his voice low. "And it stays," he said, as the evening breeze passed through the garden. Carrying the scent of blooming roses, The house glowed softly from within, a small, humble place that had witnessed the impossible. Inside, the baby stirred and let out a soft sigh. Amara smiled, rocking her gently, her eyes shining with tears that were neither sorrow nor joy, but something deeper, the peace of a heart that had finally found its home. And in that moment, as night embraced them, everything, the love, the fear, the whispers, the miracle blended into one truth. Life had given her one last gift, a love that would outlive them both.